Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We have a seriously fascinating one for you today, but before we even lay out the premise, we need to drop a quick warning.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a gentle but very serious heads up for you listening. Today, we are exploring the mysteries of Overtoun Bridge. And to do that, we do have to discuss things like animal death, severe mental illness, and a deeply tragic incident that involves the death of an infant.
Yeah, it gets heavy.
It really does. So, please, take care of yourself as we get into the details today.
Right, because, well, I want you to imagine this scenario. You're walking your dog. It's a crisp afternoon in this gorgeous, sprawling Scottish estate. Total peace and quiet, just the crunch of gravel under your boots.
Sounds incredibly idyllic, right?
It does, until you step onto this ornate Victorian stone bridge spanning a 50-foot gorge. And suddenly your dog just freezes.
Ah, that sudden stop is always so unnerving.
Exactly. Every muscle tenses up. They lock eyes on something hovering right there, just out of your line of sight. And before you can even react or pull the leash, your dog hurls itself over the stone wall, vanishing into the rocky ravine below.
Which is just, a profoundly terrifying image to put yourself in.
It's awful. But this isn't just some campfire hypothetical we made up. Today, our mission is to investigate the very real, very heavily documented phenomenon of the dog suicide bridge into Barton, Scotland.
And we are pulling from a really diverse stack of sources for this one.
We really are. We've got local news archives, so things from the Herald and the Daily Record. We looked at historical estate blueprints, local folklore, some boots-on-the-ground paranormal investigations, a bunch of Reddit and TikTok travel warnings, and even a peer-reviewed scientific paper on animal sentience.
It's a massive puzzle.
It is. Now, you know me, my baseline approach to all of this is pretty heavily rooted in logic.
Yep.
Like, we live in an era where TikTok vloggers just love to slap a haunted or cursed label on anything that looks slightly creepy.
Oh, totally. Everything is a portal to the underworld now.
Right. But there just has to be a physical, rational explanation for why over 300 dogs have jumped from this one specific spot.
And I hear that skepticism, I really do, but I tend to look at this through a slightly different lens.
The weird lens.
The empathetic lens. When you have a physical location that is steeped in 150 years of accumulated grief and, bizarre phenomena and tragedy, I just think dismissing the weird theories means you're missing the full psychological picture.
Fair enough.
Like, the history of a place leaves a mark on the community. And sometimes those local legends are actually a distorted kind of map that leads us right to the truth of why animals might react the way they do.
Okay, well, let's lay out that map then. To set the scene for you, if you were standing at the edge of this property right now, you'd be looking at Overtoun House.
It's this massive, brooding, Gothic-style country retreat.
Yeah, built in 1859 by James White. He was a highly successful chemical industrialist who basically just wanted a clean fortress away from the smog in Glasgow.
Right, escaping the city pollution.
Exactly. Fast forward a bit to 1895, and his son, John Campbell White, decides to add this bridge. He builds this heavy, imposing stone structure to span a deeply wooded 50-foot ravine called Sparty Lynn.
The architecture is gorgeous, but the statistics tied to that bridge are just chilling.
The numbers are staggering.
They are. Since the 1950s, conservative estimates say about 300 dogs have jumped. But locals, they argue the number is actually closer to 600.
Wow.
And tragically, around 50 of those dogs have actually died from the impact. But what's really wild is the specific pattern in the data. This bizarre compulsion almost entirely affects long-nosed breeds.
Right, so we're talking collies, retrievers, Labradors, Spaniels.
Exactly, which is a really crucial biological data point that we will tear into a bit later. But just hearing the raw numbers doesn't really capture the sheer panic of being there.
No, it just sounds like a spreadsheet.
Right. You really have to read the first-hand accounts to feel the visceral shock of it. Like Alice Trevorrow, she was walking her spaniel, Cassie, across Overtoun.
And Cassie was an incredibly well-trained dog, right?
Super well-trained, walking calmly off leash, which she apparently did all the time. But Alice reported that the second they reached the bridge, Cassie stopped dead in her tracks. She stared upward at something completely invisible and just launched herself into the air.
Just completely out of character.
Totally out of character. Alice actually described the atmosphere as feeling heavy, like something genuinely sinister was manipulating the dog. And, well, it gets stranger.
Oh, it always does.
There are multiple documented cases in the news archives of dogs miraculously surviving that huge 50-foot fall, scrambling all the way back up the rocky sides of the gorge, bleeding and broken, and then running straight back onto the bridge to jump off a second time.
See, I hear the terror in those stories, I do,
Mm-hmm.
but my logic brain immediately goes to human analogies.
Okay, lay on me.
Like if a human is walking along the edge of a cliff
Right.
and they are just staring down at their phone and they accidentally step off into the abyss, we don't say the cliff is possessed.
No, we blame the phone.
Right. We recognize it as a dangerous physical hazard paired with a massive distraction. So I have to ask, what is it about this specific bridge that makes otherwise rational dog owners bypass a physical hazard and jump straight to ghosts?
Well, the leap to the supernatural happens because the hazard itself makes absolutely zero sense from a biological standpoint.
Because of the survival instinct.
Exactly. An animal overriding its most primal hardwired instinct, which is the fear of a deadly drop, is profoundly unnatural. So when logic fails, human psychology naturally reaches for the supernatural to bridge that gap.
Pun intended.
Right. And Overtoun is geographically primed for that kind of thinking anyway. In Celtic mythology, they have this concept known as a thin place.
A thin place, like a geographic overlap.
Yeah, an overlap between worlds. A thin place is basically a localized area where the veil between the physical waking world and the spiritual realm is supposedly so permeable that it practically vanishes.
So energies just kind of seep through.
Exactly. And bridges in general are deeply symbolic in folklore. They're liminal spaces. They represent crossings or transitions. So locals have long considered Overtoun Bridge to be the ultimate thin place.
Okay, but every good thin place needs a ghost to power it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And according to the lore, the focal point here is the White Lady of Overtoun.
Ah, the classic Victorian ghost.
The very same. So after the builder's son, John White, passed away in 1884, his widow was just utterly shattered. Historical records show she retreated into that massive, isolated house and grieved, essentially alone, for the next 30 years.
Wow, 3 decades of just sitting in that house.
Yeah. And locals have spent the last century reporting sightings of her spirit, a pale woman in a Victorian dress peering out of the high windows or wandering the grounds.
And people think the dogs are seeing her.
Well, there's a local teacher named Paul Owens who spent 11 years extensively researching the bridge. He argues that dogs have auditory and olfactory senses that are worlds beyond ours, so they are essentially picking up on the lingering distressed frequency of the White Lady.
I mean, if you read the Daily Record archives, the witness testimonies do sound straight out of a horror movie.
They are incredibly vivid. Like Ian Fisher, a retired police officer, he reported walking his collie across the bridge at dusk. He looked up and distinctly saw a gray, shadowy figure standing at one of the bay windows.
And the house was completely empty at the time, wasn't it?
Boarded up and entirely unoccupied. And then you have Eugene Hogan, another local, who gave this terrifying description of his golden Labrador, Drift, taking the plunge.
He didn't just think the dog was chasing a squirrel or something.
No, Hogan said the dog looked gripped. He literally said it was acting like a poltergeist had possessed the animal's body and thrown it over the wall.
See, those are fantastic spooky narratives. Great for TikTok. But let's apply a basic spatial logic test to this for a second.
Okay, let's hear the logic.
Are we seriously entertaining the idea that the spectral projection of a grieving Victorian widow is, running a ghost dog catching ring out in the woods?
Well, when you put it like that.
Because the ghost theory completely shatters when you look at the physical geography of the jumps themselves.
You're talking about the highly specific jump zone.
Yes. The dogs do not just jump off the bridge at random. They almost exclusively leap from the exact same side of the bridge, specifically between the final 2 stone parapets on the right-hand side.
It is incredibly localized.
Right. So does this incredibly powerful Celtic spirit only haunt one highly specific square meter of airspace? It doesn't track.
Okay, the strict spatial data definitely weakens the Victorian ghost theory, I'll give you that. But a 19th century widow doesn't entirely explain the visceral dread that modern locals feel when they walk their dogs there today.
You think there's something else fueling the fear?
Yeah. The supernatural lore really evolved, or maybe mutated is a better word, because of a very real, incredibly dark true crime event that happened in the 90s. It layered this profound modern trauma right over the old myths.
Right, the 1994 incident.
Yes. And again, a strong warning for our listeners here. In October of 1994, a 32-year-old former lab technician named Kevin Moy walked onto Overtoun Bridge. He was with his wife and their newborn, 2-week-old son, Eogan.
Which is just heartbreaking from the start.
It is. Moy had been battling severe, unmedicated depression and paranoid schizophrenia. And as they stood on the bridge, suddenly, without any warning, he dropped his infant son 42 feet into the wooded ravine.
Good God.
He then tried to hurl himself over the stone wall, but his wife managed to physically overpower him and drag him back to safety.
It's an unfathomably horrific event to even try to process.
It's devastating, and to understand the mechanics of the tragedy, you have to look at the horrifying delusions Moy was suffering from. He genuinely believed that he was the Antichrist.
And he had delusions about his son, too, right?
Yeah, he believed his newborn son had the mark of the devil. He thought that together their existence was responsible for the Gulf War and some biological virus that was destined to destroy the world.
Just a complete detachment from reality.
Total psychosis. And the nightmare didn't even end on the bridge. After his wife pulled him back, Moy ran straight into Overtoun House, grabbed a kitchen knife, and attempted to take his own life.
Did he survive the attempt?
He did. He was subsequently found not guilty by reason of insanity and was committed to the state hospital at Carstairs. But tragically, baby Eogan did not survive the fall. He died in the hospital the very next day.
Just a total catastrophic collapse of a family. You can absolutely see how an event of that magnitude would permanently scar a community's relationship with that physical space.
Exactly. For the locals, that level of real-world horror forever altered the atmosphere of the estate. It spawned this widespread theory that the bridge absorbed a residual negative energy, like a permanent psychic stain.
And some people tie that directly to the dogs, right?
Can do. Some residents claim that the highly specific spot where the dogs jumped today is the exact same patch of stone where baby Eogan was dropped. They believe the dogs are reacting to an invisible monument of human trauma.
I mean, the psychological weight of that makes total sense. We inherently want to assign meaning to tragedy. But structurally, the timeline completely breaks causality.
You mean the timeline of the dog jumps versus the 1994 crime?
Yes. Because we know for a fact, based on the archives, that the surge of dogs leaping from Overtoun Bridge began in the 1950s.
Right, way earlier.
That is 4 full decades before Kevin Moy ever walked onto that bridge. So mathematically speaking, the residual negative energy of that specific tragedy simply cannot be the original catalyst driving the dogs over the edge.
The math definitely doesn't work out.
It doesn't. We have to strip away the lore and look at the physical mechanics of the space itself. We have to ask, what is a dog biologically experiencing when they trot onto that stone path?
And this is where we basically shift from paranormal investigation to a study in sensory illusion, isn't it?
A total blinding sensory overload. First, let's just look at the architecture. The bridge is constructed of these solid granite walls that are 18 inches thick, and they are completely cascaded with overgrown ivy.
Which is beautiful but deceptive.
Super deceptive. If you crouch down to a dog's eye level, the perspective completely shifts. From 2 feet off the ground, you cannot see the 50-foot drop at all.
So they just see a wall.
Exactly. The thick, tapered parapet, completely obscured by the ivy, essentially creates a massive optical illusion. To a dog, it looks like a continuous, flat path. Or, at worst, a low garden wall with solid ground right on the other side.
Visually, their brain is getting zero data indicating a lethal chasm.
None at all. Which leaves them entirely dependent on their hearing to map out the space.
But their hearing is completely compromised there, too.
Oh, big time. The acoustics of that ravine are bizarre. The rushing water of Sparty Lynn down below crashes against the steep rock faces. So the gorge essentially acts like a massive acoustic funnel.
It bounces all the sound upwards.
Right. It takes the white noise of the water and the wind and blasts it up. This creates a phenomenon known as acoustic masking. It scrambles a dog's highly sensitive directional hearing.
So the bottom of the gorge sounds like it's right next to them.
Exactly. It makes the rushing water sound like it's right on the other side of that 18-inch stone wall. So their eyes say it's a flat path, their ears say the ground is right there, but I mean, that still doesn't explain the compulsion to jump unprovoked.
Right. For the actual compulsion, we have to look at the work of animal behaviorist Dr. David Sands. He investigated the site and introduced probably the most scientifically robust theory we have, which is olfactory overload.
The scent theory.
Yes. Remember how we highlighted earlier that the victims are almost exclusively long-nosed hunting dogs?
The collies and the spaniels.
Exactly. Those breeds possess millions more olfactory receptors than humans do. They experience the world entirely through scent. And
Yeah.
the dense underbrush of the Sparty-Lynn ravine happens to be absolutely infested with nests of mice, squirrels, and American mink.
With the American mink being the absolute smoking gun here.
Without a doubt. Mink possess these anal glands that excrete an incredibly potent, profoundly musty odor. For a hunting dog, catching that scent is the biological equivalent of an air raid siren going off.
It just completely bypasses their rational thought.
It does. It triggers this overwhelming, involuntary, predatory prey drive. And the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds actually put Dr. Sand's theory to the test.
Oh, the scent test, right.
Yeah, they set up a controlled experiment where they presented a variety of dogs with separate canisters. One had mouse scent, one had squirrel, and one had mink. And the results were just staggering.
What happened?
70% of the dogs completely ignored the other canisters and went aggressively straight for the mink scent.
And the historical timeline finally aligns with this too. The localized surge in dogs jumping started in the 1950s and peaked in the 1960s. Well, what else was happening in the UK at that exact time?
The massive boom of American mink farming.
Exactly. The animals inevitably escaped the farms, bred wildly in the Scottish countryside, and colonized these deep, damp ravines that perfectly match the ecosystem of Sparty Lynn.
The biology and the history do interlock perfectly on paper, but, even the mink theory has its detractors.
Always someone poking holes.
Well, it's a valid question. If American mink are now populating waterways all over the country, why aren't hunting dogs hurling themselves off of every single historic stone bridge in Scotland?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Why is it so isolated to Overtown?
Right. Plus, local boots-on-the-ground sources heavily dispute the presence of the mink there at all. One article we looked at quoted a local hunter who has tracked that specific woodland for 50 years.
And what did he say?
He stated unequivocally that there is no established mink population directly beneath the bridge.
Okay, the counter evidence is valid, but I don't think it's just a single trigger. It's an environmental perfect storm.
A combination of everything.
Yeah. You have the potent biological trigger of the mink, or at least native wildlife scent, layered over the acoustic masking that scrambles their spatial awareness, all hiding behind an architectural optical illusion that visually deletes the danger.
It's pure sensory chaos for the dog.
Exactly. But honestly, digging through all this sensory data forces us to confront the core label of the bridge itself, the dog suicide bridge. We really have to ask, do animals ever possess the psychological framework to intentionally take their own lives?
That is really the ultimate question anchoring this entire legend, isn't it? The profound, unsettling idea that a pet could experience such crushing existential despair or be so completely overwhelmed by supernatural grief that it consciously decides to end its own existence.
It's a really heavy concept. So to find a definitive answer, we dug into a peer-reviewed paper authored by psychiatrist Antonio Preti. It was published in the journal Animal Sentience, and we pulled it from the WBI Studies repository.
Right, the paper titled Animal Suicide, Evolutionary Continuity or Anthropomorphism.
Yes. And Preti's findings essentially dismantle the entire mythos of animal suicide. He conducted these massive reviews of behavioral anomalies across thousands of species, and he found absolutely zero evidence of human-like suicide in the wild.
Because suicide requires a highly complex cognitive leap.
Exactly. It requires the intention to die. A creature has to consciously understand its own mortality, anticipate the lethal outcome of a specific act, and then actively choose that outcome.
Which animals just do not do. Preti argues that every story we have of animal suicide is actually just rampant anthropomorphism. Humans are just projecting complex human intent onto pure biological instinct.
Like the lemmings. Take the most famous myth, lemmings throwing themselves off cliffs.
Oh, the Disney documentary.
Literally fabricated. It was popularized by an old 1950s Disney nature documentary.
Oh.
Lemmings do not commit mass suicide. They experience a chaotic panic dispersal when their population density gets too high, and accidents just happen in the rush.
Right. And Preti points out other fascinating examples of misinterpreted behavior, too, like when a mouse suddenly loses its fear and runs directly toward a predator like a cat.
It's not experiencing suicidal depression.
No, it's usually infected by Toxoplasma gondii. That microscopic parasite physically migrates to the mouse's brain, specifically hijacking the amygdala, which is the fear center.
It rewires it, right?
Yeah, it rewires its neurology so that the scent of feline urine becomes intensely attractive. The mouse is basically being remote controlled to complete the parasite's life cycle. Or, when a deer repeatedly rams its head into a concrete wall.
It's not trying to punish itself.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It isn't trying to end its life. It's trapped in a blind, adrenalized panic, desperately trying to batter its way through a perceived obstacle so it can escape.
The survival drive is just completely short-circuiting.
Exactly. So when you synthesize Pretty's research with Dr. Sand's sensory data, the entire legend of Overtown Bridge shifts from a ghost story to a psychological mirror.
How so?
Well, humans are uniquely burdened by complex, heavy emotions, so we naturally project that burden onto the animals we love. When a collie leaps over that stone parapet, it is not experiencing a moment of profound dread
It isn't being supernaturally pulled by a Victorian widow.
or the lingering trauma of a 1994 tragedy. It is experiencing an explosive burst of single-minded curiosity. It smells a prey animal, it hears the rustle right on the other side of what looks like a 2-foot garden wall, and it just leaps.
As Dr. Sands concluded, the phenomenon is a deeply tragic, heartbreaking case of misadventure. It's not suicide.
No, it isn't.
Well, we have looked at this from every conceivable angle today. You have the incredibly powerful, almost poetic human desire to weave meaning out of sudden loss. I mean, we want the thin place mythology to be real because blaming a ghost is somehow easier to process than the random loss of a beloved pet due to an architectural quirk.
And the horror of the 1994 incident absolutely proves that Overtoun holds dark, permanent scars for the community.
But the hard reality is a mechanical one. It's a localized, tragic, perfect storm. You have an overgrown optical illusion, the scrambling effect of acoustic masking, and an intensely potent biological trigger hiding in the underbrush.
So, if you find yourself wandering the incredible grounds of Dumbarton, Scotland, taking in the Gothic architecture of the Overton estate, the practical takeaway here isn't to walk around looking over your shoulder for the White Lady.
No, the takeaway is to respect the geography, keep your dog on a very short leash.
It's really the only way to keep them safe,
Yeah.
but, peeling back the layers of this mystery does leave you with a rather profound final thought to mull over.
What's that?
Well, we are so incredibly quick to project our own intricate human struggles, our grief, our depression, our desire for meaning, onto the pure instinct-driven behaviors of our pets.
We do it all the time.
We do. And if we do that so effortlessly, what does that say about how little we truly comprehend the inner lives of the animals we share our homes with? We look at them and we see reflections of ourselves, but the reality is they're navigating a vastly different world.
A world governed by invisible currents of scent and sound that we can't even begin to perceive.
Exactly. And sometimes those invisible currents are powerful enough to make them freeze, stare at something we will never see, and leap blindly into the unknown.